The Florida Gators have built a college football playoff roster from top to bottom for 2025.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. And this Florida Gators roster, because I feel like it's weird. All right, we're just gonna say it's weird. I feel like when we talk about this team and the expectations, a lot of the conversation goes to DJ Lagway. Rightfully so. Quarterback's the most important position in all of sports. It makes a lot of sense to talk about the quarterback. But I do also feel like in those discussions, it gets completely overlooked that the rest of this team is really good. And I'm not saying that if something were to happen to DJ Lagway, God forbid, I'll knock on wood right now. I'm not saying that if something were to happen to him, then this team should still make the college football playoff. But I don't think that, without him, there were 4 games. That just doesn't make sense to me. And I feel like that's the conversation, or a lot of the conversation that gets had around DJ Lagway and this team. But this is a great roster from top to bottom, right? And you know, we've talked about this before. Quarterback, you've got DJ Lagway, and DJ Lagway is, of course, the most important player on the team. He's going to be the most important player on the team, even if, hypothetically, even if he's not the best player on the team, he's the quarterback, most important player on the team. There we go. But the rest of the room as well, you've got Aiden Warner back and reportedly performing much better than we saw last year, which again, I'm fine just writing that one off and just being like, hey, things happen. You were a redshirt freshman transfer walk-on quarterback from Yale that was supposed to be, QB3, QB4, and then you got thrown into action when you probably weren't supposed to. Whatever. We can write that one off as it happened. We're moving on. I'm not letting a game in your freshman season define what I think of you career-wise. That's nonsensical, okay? You've got Harrison Bailey. You got in the transfer portal Tramell Jones, who I think he's going to be really good. I don't know. Again, the way that I think about it is always, even if he's the most physically talented backup, which I do think he is, a true freshman is not someone that I want to rely upon, especially when we talk about backups, because when you talk about backups, you're generally talking about someone that can come in and keep the offense moving and not screw you over. Freshmen are volatile. So that's my concern there. Running back room is one of the best in the country. Jaden Baugh, stellar true freshman season. Jacoby Jackson. And also, we had a couple of the insiders, which if you want to join that, it's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. The link is in the description below. But we had a few people ask about grading the roster, position rooms, group by group. I'm not going to do that part just because, I think that there's not a ton of benefit in giving it a grade. We could just talk about the room, right? Running back, Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson, going to be a great 1-2 duo. Running back 3 is going to be undecided. KD Daniels. We'll see what happens whenever Trayon Webb gets healthy. You've got Duke Clark. You've got Chad Gasper. You've got Byron Lewis is going to be a stud probably. And so I think that running back room from top to bottom is really good. Jabbar Jalouk is someone that I don't care if they don't bring in, the biggest name running back in the class. They bring in damn good football players, and they're consistently productive, and they have been throughout Jabbar Jalouk's tenure. I'd say not even just at Florida, just as a running backs coach. He's done that consistently. I'm happy with it. The wide receiver room is an interesting group. I think that there's a ton of promise and a ton of potential in the room. But we don't know what J. Michael Sturdivant is going to look like full-time in this offense, right? We could say, I think he's going to be really good, but we don't know that definitively. Trey Wilson has had his issues staying healthy, and he will hopefully be able to stay healthy this year and be able to play fully this year. Great. Ton of promise with guys like Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III, Nate Montgomery, Muiz Tonkara has gotten a ton of praise since he got on campus about 2 months ago almost. Then you've got the guys that, I mean, not even the guys, just you've got Aiden Mizell, who every year it feels like we have that conversation about who's going to be wide receiver 3 that steps up, right? Who's going to be the breakout receiver? Because last year, with the 2024 season, we were talking about you got Trey Wilson and you got Elijah Badger, and then the rest is a battle for wide receiver 3. Aiden Mizell, Chim Dike is someone that a lot of people didn't have high expectations for. And then the season happened. Trey Wilson left early. Aiden Mizell ended up being the 3rd receiver there, but even then never really clicked. And yeah, he had the great play against Mississippi State. They got called back on total BS. Doesn't change what he did there, but it also doesn't change that there wasn't much production from him last year. And I'm a fan of Aiden Mizell. I think that he's got a pretty high ceiling as a vertical spacer, we'll say, a vertical stretcher. But we got to see it at some point, right? Khalil Jackson coming back from injury, TJ Abrams, Tank Hawkins, 2 speedy guys that we're kind of just waiting to see if they develop into consistent contributors. Tank Hawkins played a good bit last year, but production wasn't fully there, which I will say I think Tank is someone that can be a great underneath option that turns checkdowns into touchdowns. And last year, we didn't have a ton of checkdowns in this offense, right? It was the running game or DJ Lagway taking the top off the defense. That was it. The tight end room, I'm very high on. I've said that before. It's not a secret how I feel about Hayden Hansen as a starting tight end. I think Tony Livingston's got a ton of talent. I think Amir Jackson can finally break out. My only concern, or not even concern, but my only negative comment, I guess, which isn't even that negative if you ask me, I just hate how definitively everyone talks about Amir Jackson as like, I'll say something and it's like, oh, well, we know he's a good tight end. Why? How do you know he's a good tight end? I would love it if he can become what we think he can become. But a lot of this fan base that is praising Amir was praising Arliss Boardingham as well. And that one was a failure from the jump. He was always someone that had promised but didn't work out and needed to develop as a tight end to be a tight end. And so Amir Jackson played basically a receiver in high school. I'm going to need to see you play tight end before I could say you're a good tight end. It's insane to me to say he's definitively a good tight end. We don't know what he's going to be. We can all say, I think most people will agree in this Florida Gators fan base that we think he's going to be pretty damn good. But the definitive talk needs to kind of ixnay a little bit because it just makes no sense. I think that Hayden Hansen, Tony Livingston this year, very good. I love that duo. I think that duo gives you pass catching options and blocking options without really having a liability at either spot. I know Hayden doesn't have the praise as a great receiver just because he doesn't get thrown the ball. And I've said before, I don't think he's going to create much separation by, just shaking people in coverage. But I do think you send him up the seam or you use him as a 3rd down chain mover. That's a great role for him. Tony Livingston can be more versatile as a pass catcher. But I think that you've got a great tight end room right now, especially at the top. I'm very comfortable for when this team goes 12 personnel that they're going to be really freaking good. We're going to talk about the trenches when we get back with Locked On Gators. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason's already heating up. College football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eyes on big-name quarterbacks, breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. I'm not naming names about anybody that's going to be a breakout until after my fantasy drafts are done. I will say that. But you think Lamar is going to pop off? You think Josh Allen's going to have another MVP season? you can make some plays there. I'm just saying, download the PrizePicks apps today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. And if you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink, which a lot of people don't talk about, but it catches up to you. Right now, Drip Drop's offering Locked On listeners 20% off on your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits even harder, especially if you plan on being in the stands this fall. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the trenches here, and we're going to spend some more time talking about the trenches here because this is a Florida Gators offense that is going to be driven by the offensive line, right? When you haven't had the best offensive line you could put out there for Florida under Billy Napier, you've struggled, right? Except for instances where in 2022 you had Anthony Richardson, who even when the offensive line did struggle, still made plays. And we spoke about that quite a bit, right? We spoke about how in 2022, Anthony Richardson's mobility made this offensive line look better because they weren't giving up sacks, but he was still pressured at a pretty high rate. 2023, that felt more noticeable when you had Graham Mertz back there and unable to consistently create after pressure gets in. Last year, we saw DJ Lagway get hit a lot, especially when his hamstring got injured. We saw him not be able to evade as much, but he was still standing tall through contact and through the pressure. Like he was still going through all of that. So we've seen the offensive line have their ups and downs. This year, the expectation is going to be an elite offensive line, right? You've got a 2 deep that I think a lot of people are comfortable with. Austin Barber, Najee Harris, Jake Slaughter, Damian George, Bryce Lovett. Your starting 5 from left to right. 4 of those 5 guys were starters last year at those same positions that they're playing this year. Where last year, because going into the 2024 season, it was, well, you've got Austin Barber back, you've got Jake Slaughter back, and you've got Damian George back as starters. But Damian George is moving from right tackle to right guard. And so that's basically not bringing back 3 starters. That's bringing back 3 names that were there, but not actually bringing back 3 starters at their positions. This year, you're bringing back 4 at their positions, and that's huge. And then depth-wise, Fletcher Westphal, Caden Jones, I'm really, really excited for that tackle duo. You've got Rod Kearney is hopefully going to get some significant playing time this year. Jason Zandamela probably going to be center too, if you ask me. And so I think that this offensive line 2 deep is just looking really comfortable on paper. Need to see it be put into action during games, but on paper, that looks like a really comfortable offensive line 2 deep to have, and the offense should thrive because of it. Rushing lanes opening, quarterbacks being protected. That's the way to go about it. When you're built through this Billy Napier offense, you're going to be built through the offensive line. Defensive line, another strength of this team, arguably the strength of this team. And just for conversation purposes and versatility purposes, we're going to just talk about D-line, edge, just defensive line right now. As in, we're combining them. Partially because some guys are going to be moving around playing multiple spots. But your starting defensive line, Tyreak Sapp, Caleb Banks, George Gums. I'm interested to see what George Gums is going to look like as a full-time starter. Because last year, while Jack Pyburn brought basically nothing to the passing game, he also was there on early downs more consistently. And so I'm not saying that, George Gums or anyone else can't defend the run on the edge, but we haven't seen them do it for extended periods of time because Jack Pyburn would come in for those. And then when it was more likely that passes were coming, then you see other guys. So I'm interested to see what the run defense looks like on the edge there. Nose tackle is going to be Jamari Lyons. who got injured prior to the 2024 season, missed the entirety of the season, is back, is ready to go. I'm excited to see what he could be. I know that Jamari Lyons was someone that a lot of people spoke about as a potential breakout candidate last season prior to the injury, because his injury happened right before the year too. So that one especially sucked because there was a ton of hype building around him. And then the injury happened right before the season and ended his year. But even behind, I mean, with the defensive line, we're not going to talk about just 2 deep. You can go 3 deep and have genuine contributors there. Like, I think that at Jack, George Gums, starter. You got LJ McCray, you've got Kofi Asari, Jaden Woods, a true freshman. Kofi Asari, of course, the transfer portal addition from UMass, who played like 3 or 4 SEC games last year. He looked decent in them, which I think is very promising. That's like, hey, well, with UMass's strength and conditioning, you look decent against SEC teams. Let's get you with an SEC strength conditioning staff and see how you perform against them. I've been skeptical of the addition. I'm not going to stop being skeptical until I'm proven wrong. That's my approach to everything. But I do think there's a lot of potential in that Jack room. Nose tackle, I'm really excited to see what Mekhi Boyero is going to do in year 2. I thought that for someone who probably wasn't expected to play as much as he did in 2024, because you had Cam Jackson, you had Des Watson, but you didn't have Jamari Lyons, who was supposed to spend a good amount of time there. And so Mekhi Boyero, DeAndre Robinson both played a good bit there. DeAndre Robinson, of course, now at North Carolina. But I'm excited to see what Mekhi Boyero can do now that he's got a year of experience, strength conditioning, and just playing time. I'm excited to see there. Cameron James is hopefully going to be someone that has a real breakout year. There were times on film where he looked like he might be one of the better defensive linemen on the team. Of course, played behind Tyreak Sapp, who had a fantastic year. And so Cameron James should be right behind Tyreak Sapp. They should both get a ton of time and should both be able to pretty consistently rotate in and out, stay fresh, stay ready, stay available. And that could be just a killer duo there. Brendan Bett coming in from Baylor, Brian Taylor Jr., Jeremiah McLeod, Joseph Mbachu. I think with me, there's a good bit of guys on the defensive line that we haven't seen a ton of yet. Like Mekhi Boyero, we've seen a ton of. We saw him a good bit last year. I expect him to be good. Cameron James, we saw him. I expect him to be good. Then there's other spots like LJ McCray we didn't see a ton of last year. Kofi Asari we haven't seen. Jaden Woods we haven't seen. And again, I think we all know I'm generally someone who I don't like having too many guys with expectations. But I do think right now you've got 2 or 3 spots you haven't really seen people pop out. But you've got about 9 guys to fill those roles. And so even if you take my approach, which is some guys aren't going to live up to those expectations. Some guys will live up to expectations. And then there's going to be the rare couple guys that might break out. We're looking for basically 9 guys to fill 3 spots, depth-wise, all depth. I feel pretty comfortable in that spot because I go, okay, well, even if we talk about 1 or 2 guys breaking out, guys living up to the expectations, even the guys that do fall behind, they just fall behind and they're hurt from it. Not necessarily the team, which frankly, I'm caring more about the team right now than an individual maybe falling through the cracks if they have a rough go of things. We are going to talk about the back 7 here on Locked On Gators when we get back. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Did you call back? No, you probably went to the next person that showed up. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communication. So if you're also juggling 2 phones to keep business and personal calls separate, Open Phone solves that problem instantly. You can see why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOn. Locked On College. That's OPENPHONE.com/Locked On College. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open phone, no missed calls. More importantly, no missed customers. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free, wherever the podcast and on YouTube. To wrap up today's show, we are talking about the back seven here. And we'll start with linebackers, right? We'll continue going in order. I think you may have the best linebacker room in the country if you're Florida. I think that, and look, when I mean like defensive line, maybe the best room on the team, maybe the most important room. Offensive line, maybe the most important room. Linebacker very well might be the best room, but just positional value, not going to be considered the most important room. But Florida's got a very unique situation with Pup Howard, Jaden Robinson, Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, Ty Jackson. You've got an elite linebacker room where, again, could maybe be the best linebacker room in the country in 2025. You should have. I don't think that you see both Pup Howard and Jaden Robinson declare for the draft, right? I think that whichever one starts probably declares for the draft, and whichever one is the backup probably comes back for 2026 for their turn as a starting Mike. I think it's a pretty good situation to be in because that also means for 2026 you'll have Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, Ty Jackson, all back. Malik Morris coming in the 2026 class. Linebacker room's in a really good spot right now, which is especially impressive considering the amount of coaching staff turnover there's been at that spot of just even guys moving in or out of the room but staying on staff. It's just been impressive to see them carry that over. Cornerback, you've got Devin Moore, you've got Dijon Johnson, you've got Cormani McClain, you've got Ben Hanks III, you've got Jamrock Grimsley, you've got Teddy Foster, Javari Flowers. If you want to talk about the nickel, which is kind of more safety, you've got Sharif Denson, Aaron Gates, Josiah Davis. I think that nickel room might be the best in the entire country. Incredibly high in Sharif Denson, and I think Aaron Gates is right there with him, right behind him. So I think that when you talk about this cornerback room, at the very top, I think a lot of people are comfortable. However, Devin Moore needs to stay healthy. Dijon Johnson needs to become a little bit more consistent. Cormani McClain needs to learn the playbook better. And then you need the young guys to step up. If that's Ben Hanks III stepping up as a true freshman and taking that corner 4 spot, then so be it. Again, we know who the top 3 guys on the depth chart are. You're looking for guys to take over corner 4. That's 4 guys on the back. Onis Konenbani. That's 4 or 5 guys vying for the last corner spot on the depth chart. And so, again, similar to defensive line, I feel a little bit more comfortable. But the thing is, of course, with all those spots, one injury happens, it can throw a wrench into everything. And Devin Moore has struggled to stay healthy at this point. So hopefully that'll be that'll be figured out. And we'll be talking about a healthy Devin Moore that's going to go into the NFL draft after this 2025 season. Safety, I know there's a ton of people that aren't big fans of Jordan Castell because, he doesn't hit hard enough and all that. Look, I know a hard-hitting safety is fun. If you're a guy that does your job and goes out there and just performs and isn't a liability, I'm not going to hate you. I prefer poppy plays. I think Bryce Thornton is more likely to bring you those. And I think you're going to have Bryce Thornton for after 2025. I think you're going to have him for another year. And I think that'd be great for the team, right? Like, fact is, Bryce Thornton doesn't have the size that the NFL is going to love. And until he goes out there and proves that he could be better than, or not even better, because he was very good last year, until he can go out there and prove that he can be consistently great and translate to the NFL at that size, that's going to be a question. And even when he does go out there and perform consistently great, that's going to be a question. But then you can go, who cares? Look at what I just did in the SEC, which is what half the NFL is made up of. You've got answers there. Jordan Castell is someone that, he's not going to bring insane hits, But I also think he's someone that doesn't get out of coverage or doesn't get out of position very often. I think he's gone out there and made some plays on the ball. I think you just got to kind of get a little bit more consistency. But I think he's someone that long term might be better suited to being near the box. But right now, I'm comfortable with him. Behind him, I have no idea what we're going to see. That's the thing where behind him, everybody's a question mark. Whether it's Michael Carraway, Hilton Stubbs, Lagonza Hayward, Alfonso Allen Jr., I don't think many of us envisioned as, hey, he's going to be a guy that's stepping in and being the guy. But I'm very interested to see how that shakes up. Florida's also been known, especially under Billy Napier, to play some safeties a ton. Jordan Castell has led the team in snaps played for the past 2 seasons. Probably going to play a lot of them in 2025 as well. Special teams, Trey Smack, I'm a big fan of his. I know he missed some kicks, but I also think that fans are unreasonable where you have NFL kicker expectations from every college kicker, and I just think that's not reasonable. I know people talk about the missed field goal in overtime against Tennessee. And it's like, yeah, well, horrible coaching made that kick way more difficult than it needed to be. Arkansas, horrible coaching made that kick way more difficult than it needed to be. Like, I don't know what to tell you other than every kick we talk about with Trey Smack, almost every kick we talk about with Trey Smack that he missed is coaching put him in a bad spot. And sure, you could say, well, yeah, maybe coaching puts you in a bad spot, but if you're a great kicker, you'll negate that. Fine. Maybe he's not a great kicker, an all-time great. I think he's still a very good kicker. I think he's going to be in the NFL. And I think that either way, if all of your misses are, hey, coaching put him in this spot, maybe coach better, and we won't deal with that. You got maybe the best long snapper in the country in Rocco Underwood. We have no idea who's going to be kick returner, punt returner full-time. Tommy Doman at Michigan had similar numbers to Jeremy Crawshaw. I'm interested to know what the difference is going to be. Honestly, just climate-wise. I think that kicking in warmer air, I know kicking in warmer air is easier, same way as hitting a baseball in warmer air. It travels farther. So I'm curious to see what that's going to look like as he goes from Ann Arbor to Gainesville. But either way, this is a damn good roster. This is a college football playoff roster. I don't care what anyone else says. That's what they are. That's why that's my expectation. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free, wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work, New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.